Bliss, and welcome back to another episode of Content Alchemy. And today we have a special show all about copywriting and SEO and AI. So I think this is going to be a really fun episode, especially for writers out there, and also for any content strategists. And our guest this week is Mariah Bliss. Mariah is the Director of Content Marketing at Travelers Insurance, where she oversees content strategy for its commercial accounts group. With over 15 years of experience developing content strategy for financial services, insurtech, and B2C brands, Mariah specializes in helping diverse audiences get real value from every piece of content. She has previously worked at Fidelity Investments and Simply Business, and has been recognized for her expertise in SEO, digital strategy, and content optimization. We have a great conversation for you today, so let's just get into it. Awesome. We're all here. Hello. I just want to welcome in Mariah Bliss. It's so wonderful to have you on the show with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And of course, Matt. Welcome back, Matt.
Hey, Shelby.
Good to have you as well.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, it's really a pleasure to be able to have Mariah here. And I want to kind of hop into this because we haven't really been able to meet very formally. This is kind of our first time chatting. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you got to this point, especially as a director of content marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share. So I actually first started my career as a freelance writer. I spent about 6 or 7 years doing that. And I found that while I really enjoyed the actual work involved with freelancing, I didn't enjoy all the stuff around it. So the admin, the invoices, the prospecting for clients. So I'm outside of the Boston area now, but I used to live in Boston, and there's a huge startup scene there. And so I made the hop into the startup world, and I found I really enjoyed it. I loved collaborating with people. I loved being part of an overall project pipeline versus just having like a piecemeal approach to content. I could see, the ideation, the concepting, and more importantly, the measurements that came after when you put content out into the world. So got my start there. I went into insurtech, so that nice blend of financial services and the startup world, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoy the challenge that comes with taking complex information, things that may be intimidating because maybe it's a financial product that people don't know a lot about or don't really want to know about, and breaking it down in a way that's actually accessible and helps people have what I call their aha moments, like really connecting what the content is saying with their lives and producing that emotional reaction to get them to get a quote or take any sort of action on our site. So that's what kept me in financial services. So at the insurance company I was with, I rose to a senior manager level. Then I made the hop to a true financial services company, Fidelity. I led a really strong promotional copywriting team there, and we were very much obsessed with those micro actions that lead to conversions. So that was a ton of fun. And then I found myself at Travelers as a director of content marketing. So still in the financial services space, still taking that complex information and helping people derive as much value as possible from it. So yeah, it's been a fun career, and I don't see it stopping anytime soon. Really enjoying myself.
Nice. So he's director of content marketing. The first question that I have is, what is the biggest difference between that content marketing side of things and assuming that there is a just general marketing side of things too? What's the biggest difference between those two teams or two roles?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the biggest difference I see is the content marketers really acting as the steward of the piece of content to ensure that nothing is lost as the marketing tactics are put out there. So, you as a content marketer, whether you're a director or an individual contributor, you're really responsible for ensuring that the content holds true to the strategy that you've developed, which is, can we make this audience member feel a certain way and produce a certain action? And what you're responsible for, and what I see really being the difference with traditional marketers, is understanding what within that content you think, and, prove it via testing, but what do you think is going to produce that action? And how can you ensure channel by channel that content shows up and produces that action? So I find that a lot of traditional marketers will think tactically, like rolling out, paid ads, social, etc. And you as a content marketer playing a bit more of a psychologist, saying, hey, when you're rolling out this ad, this content needs to take this format to produce the best outcomes. So really, that's what I see the biggest difference being.
Is that so? On your team right now, are you primarily focused on any certain types of content? Like, is it written? Is it video? Or just kind of a combination of everything?
So we're really pushing thought leadership content. And a lot of that is in response to the emergence or the cascade of AI content that's coming out there. I think what we're finding is that there's just been a huge influx of generic white noise content. And it makes sense, right? Like if you're using AI to create content, it's all using the same data, the same inputs to create the content. So eventually things end up sounding the same. And I think as an industry, we're really seeing shifts towards thought leadership content to help ensure and differentiate brands so that they're not lost in this white noise. And at Travelers, that's what we're really pushing, is how do we ensure that our content stands out and features the things that only we can talk about as a brand, and not necessarily more generic advice or tactics or risk mitigation tips that everyone else in our space can talk about.
I really like that, because especially getting back to that, like that first thing you mentioned of being able to really dial down like complex ideas and topics, to be able to differentiate that. So we talk about that all the time on our team, in the case of storytelling, of how do you really take something that is incredibly complex, like insurance, like financial services, and boil it down to like, what's the heart of this? What is the heart? What is the story that we're trying to tell? And I think that thought leadership is really important to be able to differentiate people from that, because especially in that storytelling and being able to really boil down to, what are the essential parts that our audiences need to understand and be aware of.
Yep.
And I think that kind of gets us into like exactly what content marketing, how it's defined and how it can kind of be mistaken for other things. So something that, you had brought up before this is kind of how content marketing can be mistaken for SEO blog writing, and how it can trigger, is it more than just the algorithm? Is it more than just, we have to hit this one specific audience? And I think you've already kind of gotten into this of, content marketing is really ensuring that we're not losing the strategy. We're not losing the story. We're not losing the heart. So what is it? How does content marketing kind of go beyond just hitting that algorithm just right?
Yeah. And I think just to go back to the content marketing is often, seen as tantamount with like SEO blog writing. I think that's because content marketing can be so hard to measure. And with SEO, you do have tools to help you measure. You do have sort of it can be a messy funnel, but there is sort of a journey where it's like you bring people to your site. Hopefully they convert after some period of time, whatever your pipeline looks like. So I think that's why content marketing has fallen into this space where it's seen as synonymous with, search engine optimization, because it's easier to measure, and it's harder to go to executives to say content is creating an ecosystem. And sometimes it's going to be messy. It's just creating touch points. But I think, content marketing is so much more, SEO is part of it, but content marketing really is understanding that people don't follow a linear purchase fashion. They see multiple touch points. You go on LinkedIn, you go on Google or Bing, whatever your search engine is of choice. You listen to podcasts, you watch ads, and content is all of those experiences. It's all of those touch points. And, there's a crazy stat out there that I read recently that people can touch, depending on your audience, but, folks touch an average of like 60 something touch points before they make a purchase decision. And that expands even more if it's a large purchase. And if you're not showing up in those touch points, you're not getting the eventual conversion. So content marketing is just creating this ecosystem where your brand is owning that share of voice, is really owning those touch points. And that can be hard and messy to measure. But I think the brands that really understand and are comfortable with sometimes that gray area are the brands that are succeeding in a world where people are just online on their phones consuming so much media information.
Yeah. So earlier you talked about thought leadership content being really important. I 100% agree with this. But I'm curious, in your role, how do you convince some of these industry thought leaders that, hey, we're gonna shoot a video of you and you're gonna say all these things? like most of these people are not like made for that on-screen kind of stuff. They don't really want to do that stuff. So I'm curious, how do you go about creating effective thought leadership content when there is that reluctancy from those actual thought leaders?
Yeah. And I think overall, it's really about working with that thought leader's comfort level and figuring out what works for them, because it's not always going to be a video interview. Text is still important. Sometimes it will be that straightforward interview. Sometimes it could be clips. I mean, the content asset itself can change, but it's really developing a relationship with your SMEs, with your thought leaders, to get them to trust you. So much of it is trust. I think a lot of the reluctance, one, comes from just being busy and not understanding the goals. So it's harder for them to say, sure, you can take up my time, when they don't understand what this is going to be used for. And that really builds into that overall trusting relationship. You have to work with your thought leaders to say, this is why we're doing this. This is why this matters. You are part of our brand ecosystem that really ensures that people see us as leaders. And if they're not comfortable with video, that's fine. But I really think it just comes down to building that relationship, ensuring that your thought leaders understand the goals, and getting them excited to be part of the mission. I think sometimes too, we can, and we as like a broad like content marketing statement, I think we can treat thought leaders in a tactical manner. And that makes them feel like they're part of a transaction, right? Like they feel like, oh, you're only approaching me for interviews to create content. I'm not really part of the overall pipeline. I'm not really sharing in success. And you have to connect those dots with them. So much of content marketing, I feel, is successful relationship management. It's like very little sometimes. I find that very little of it is actual writing. And it's more about getting buy-in, getting folks to believe in what you're doing, bringing them along for the ride, and then celebrating the successes along the way, or making sure you have opportunities to share your learnings if something doesn't work out. So if you think of it from a relationship management standpoint, your thought leaders are much more likely to be on board because they trust you and they feel safe and comfortable in your very capable content marketing hands.
Yeah, that's I love that you mentioned that, because I really do feel like right now there is so much of, there's kind of two languages that are happening of, like, okay, well, how can we make this more automated? How can we bring more AI in? But also there is that side, you kind of mentioned it, of an ecosystem of touch points, where it is something that's kind of a living, breathing organism. It is an ecosystem that many of us are, existing within, and especially being able to bring thought leaders as a part of that ecosystem and being able to manage those relationships is really fascinating. Especially in this time of, we're very technology driven. It's, what is the next best thing? How do we speak to the next best thing? But keeping in mind those relationships and the fact that this ecosystem is constantly evolving and changing and, and growing. It's breathing. It's kind of a natural organism. And I think that really brings to question that integrating AI into the content process, because I think a lot of people are viewing this as, okay, well, we're kind of taking that relationship management out. We're taking some humanity out of that. But there is kind of a balance that we're able to find. So where do you find that balance with bringing AI into content marketing?
Yeah. So I know it varies for everyone. Like some people love using it to draft content and some people are very adverse to it. I definitely fall in the use AI for the beginning of your content pipeline and at the end. So I never use it for a first draft because I find it's really tough to iterate on AI content. There's just so many places you can take it. I would rather create that first draft and then tell AI, like, how do I improve this? One of the things that I think AI is really useful for is that ideation and also testing your ideas in the first place. One of my favorite prompts is to test the novelty of the content topics and ideas that I've come up with. So again, going back to that conversation about there's just so much white noise out there. No matter what industry you're in, you have competitors who are probably creating similar content to you. And one of the ways that you win is to differentiate your content. But unless you have hours to spend on competitive research, how do you know that content is differentiated? You don't want to wait until the metrics come in to be like, well, that content didn't perform well because it's like XYZ that's already out there. So what I do is I take the content ideas and the synopses with each idea and I upload it into my AI tool of choice. And what I do is I say, hey, how novel are these ideas based on my competitors? And I provide them with my competitors. And I say, scale the novelty, like on a scale of 1 through 10, tell me, with 1 being the most unique and 10 being very generic, like everyone's written on it, give it a score, and then tell me why you've given it that score. And I find like as I perfected the prompt, it's really, really useful because it's told me, hey, I'm giving this content a score of 3. Your competitor has touched on it, but I think if you take this direction, this could really be differentiated, valuable content. And if I'm coming back with scores of 10, like, hey, I can actually show you links. And sometimes you do need to ask AI to show you, the competitive links. It'll say your competition is written on this exact topic. It helps me ensure that my time is being spent with ideas and topics that are really going to provide maximum value for the audience in my specific industry. And I don't have to spend hours playing detective on my competitors' websites. So that's where I think AI is the most useful, ensuring that you're creating content at the ideation stage that's most valuable to your audience. And where it gets a little like, maybe AI isn't the right process for that, in my opinion, is for the content creation itself, because only you can understand another human's emotions and motivations and what brought them to that space in the first place. And it's hard to paste emotional content into AI content. It feels weird. So it's usually best, I've found, to create that first draft and then have AI make improvements, as an editor, maybe make suggestions where to put data. So I think that's the most successful pipeline integrating AI. It really helps ensure that your creativity and your human emotions aren't stifled, but AI's ability to just collect information super quickly is really unlocked.
I love how you say that you're using it to help you with the research. So much of AI content is, one, really obvious to just kind of like point out.
Yeah, I know.
and 2, I think there's this really, I don't know if it's just me, I feel like it's everyone, but there's this growing feeling that it's just lazy. Where it's like, okay, yeah, you generated a blog post, you generated an image, you generated a video. It feels lazy. And like, to me, I'm like, I don't know how we're supposed to attract the attention of our customers when we use things like AI. And if it comes off as lazy, you're hurting yourself. Even though you've made this thing in less than a minute, it's still coming off as lazy and it's actually hurting. So I love to hear.
I agree.
I love to hear what you're saying, where it's like, no, use it, but not in a lazy way. Like, use it for the thing that you couldn't. I mean, you could go through and you could do all this research and like figure out like, okay, how much are all these other companies writing the same kind of content, but you're letting it do the difficult part that nobody really wants to do. And I think that's what's really fascinating to me about all that stuff.
Yeah. And I think people who use AI to just create content and put it out there are really forgetting that content is meant to connect and to produce emotions. And we know AI is notoriously bad at emotional content. It's, it undermines the purpose of the content marketer, which is to, be a writer, but also be a psychologist, be an anthropologist, understand what makes people in your world tick and use that to, produce that action that you're looking for. So when you automate the connection, you're sort of defeating the purpose of your own job, really.
Right.
It's why I always crack up when I see comments on LinkedIn and posts that are clearly AI comments and posts. It's like the whole point is to connect. But if we're automating connection, what are we doing here, people?
Yeah, I think that's what's really fascinating about what you're doing too, is like, because you're doing it in the ideation process, but not in the creation of the idea, is really fascinating. Because I think a lot of times we hear, in conversation with people about AI and how they're integrating it, even beyond just like the generative content that they're creating. When they do go into that ideation process, it's usually, okay, well, I need to create a 30-second commercial. What are your ideas, AI, for what I should be saying? But when you're coming in with the ideas already formed, what is the novelty of this idea is really fascinating, because AI is already having, what is AI pulling from in the first place to be able to create those other ideas? It's pulling from that algorithm. It's pulling from things that it's already seen. Yep. So when you come in with an idea that you've created as a person, as somebody who wants to connect with the audience, being able to use AI for really, truly what it's best at, which is analyzing patterns, which is seeing trends. To be able to kind of support your argument, support, your push for this specific content and how to create, continue to push it in different directions is really fascinating, and not something I think a lot of people are doing at the moment, which is utilizing AI for really what it's best at.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Because if you're getting ideas from AI, it's just ideas that it's gotten from other brands, and you're not really producing anything new. And that can have value if you need to create content, if your brand needs to show up in certain conversations, like if there are some keywords you need to target where it would be weird if your brand didn't show up with content in those spaces, by all means use AI and edit from there. But really, if you're looking to create differentiated content, you just can't use it for the creation and ideation process. It's really best at research, helping you refine it, and going from there.
Is there a certain type of content right now that you feel like is working better than anything else?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think really, and not to bang on the thought leadership drum, but I think thought leadership is really what's powerful these days with content. And that can show up in a variety of different assets, whether it's video, whether it's a LinkedIn post, whether it's a long form piece of content. I think people are so desperate to connect with other people these days. And again, this is within the framework of AI. It's automating everything. People are looking for genuine connections. And when you hit on a piece of content where it's an actual person telling you about their experiences, what they've gone through to reach the conclusion or to have the outlook that they're sharing with you, that's really powerful, because that's not happening a lot anymore. So I find that content is just, I think more people are going to do it. I think some brands are playing catch up, and other brands are already ahead of the game by saying, folks, we need to connect. We need to not rely on AI to create those connections. So yeah, I still find it is the most powerful form of content.
Yeah, it's fascinating too, to be able to see that with thought leadership, because I think there's a couple different approaches as well, like with influencer marketing as well, okay, well, can we take somebody that people already know, and it starts to feel, okay, well, is this person just being bought and paid for to speak on this? Or is it, or do they truly believe this? So I would like to hear your thoughts on that, of, thought leadership versus just pure influencer marketing as well.
Yeah, I think and this could be my own personal feelings coloring my opinion, but I do think there's a bit more of a danger with influencer marketing that you don't necessarily have with thought leadership, because influencers, every person's followable, right? But there's so much more risk with influencer marketing, because you're not putting in the due diligence that you would otherwise put in with your own thought leaders. Like with your brand's thought leaders, you know them. You know what they're going to say. You've curated them. Like, they are super careful with your brand messaging because they are your brand. But with influencer marketing, I think there's more of a risk where, yes, you're using their audience. And if it's a great connection, that's great. I think that's really successful. But there's not as much of that due diligence with understanding who that person is. And I think sometimes we see influence, like downfalls of influencers a lot in spaces where it's really easy to find out information, and it's really easy for, folks to sort of hop on that information, and it ends up having repercussions for your brand that you don't necessarily have control over. So I think when it's done well, it's still a super powerful marketing tactic. I just think that there are risks associated with it that we've seen in popular culture lately, where a lot of beloved figures, there are downfalls. Maybe they end up putting a post out there that you had no idea about, like whether in the past or, they uploaded TikTok, just casually talking to their audience. And all of a sudden your brand is caught up in that firestorm of the downfall. So yeah, maybe it's my insurance background coloring it, but I'm like, oh, there's risk. I don't know.
It's like quality
They've changed
control.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, and I don't know how much you can get into this, but I'm curious what that general process is like for you as, you go into work and you're like, all right, we're creating content today. Like, how do you decide how do you prioritize what content needs to be created and what stuff can sort of wait a little bit? And are there things where you're like, oh, we have an opportunity, we must take it right now, like go, go, go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a really great question. It always ties to what's hot for the business in the upcoming year. So we just completed our 2025 planning, and understanding what the business wants to do next year and how that translates to content, it always needs to be prioritized. And I think that's really just generally like great advice across multiple industries is, what does your business want to do? And how does that translate into content, which is the content marketer's job, right? Taking those priorities and ensuring that your content is showing up for it. So that's how I prioritize my day. There are trends that do pop up where you'd say, ooh, that is something that would be really interesting to write about. But what I've come to really learn, and what makes me different from like baby Mariah, who was in her 20s, it was like, let's hop on trends, let's do it, is really connecting it and making that business case back to, your marketing or campaign stakeholder, your executive who you're talking to. It's not enough to say, hey, this is trending, let's hop on the conversation, because you could argue by the time something is trending, the conversation's already done. And you're just sort of another brand that's trying to capitalize on a trend. It has to be meaningful. It has to tie back to a priority, and it's up to the content marketer to make that case. And I find the most successful content marketers can translate content into business executive language, where it's not just, hey, this content is hot right now, there's this hot new trend, like we should show up for it. It's saying, this is a trending conversation. This directly ties back to the KPIs that the business has set for us in the upcoming year. Let's test to see what happens when we create content that talks about this trend. So yeah, that's how I prioritize my day.
Nice.
I think it's interesting too, the way that you're talking about how content marketers are able to present things to maybe more executive teams. And that kind of gets into our final question of, why aren't content marketers leading more marketing teams?
Yeah, that's always fascinated me, because content marketers are everywhere. We're like the cockroaches of the marketing world. You can't kill us. We're everywhere. But, on a more serious note, content marketers usually, depending on the company, but you play in every channel. So you'll have a content marketer who understands email, paid search, organic search, social. Like, you've usually created and touched on those channels in some way, and you've developed that knowledge, and you really have a good understanding of how your audience shows up for those specific channels. And I find that, content marketers have this core capability of understanding who their audience is, understanding how channels perform, and understanding how to optimize for better channel performance. And to me, it's fascinating that more content marketers aren't made growth leaders or marketing leaders, because you're already doing all of the stuff that makes for a successful traditional marketing leader. And, maybe there's more finessing needed in understanding like budgets or, ads, whatever. But I think that stuff can be learned really quickly, and content marketers are notoriously fast learners. I find that the inverse is probably harder, I would imagine, where you have someone who, is a traditional marketer. They understand tactics and budgets, but they're not creating the content for their audience. So there's that little wall of separation that I find sometimes gets marketers tripped up. So I would love, and maybe this will happen, but I would love to see more content marketers actually heading up marketing teams, because they have that core emotive connection to audiences. And that, we talked about advocating for content earlier in this conversation, but they're advocates. And that advocacy extends to your customer. And that just makes for a better marketing leader.
Yeah. This has been 30 minutes of pretty incredible, just how you go about like thinking through all this stuff. Like, it is something that is super on your mind, and you are just on top of all of it. And
thanks.
I really appreciate I'm like over here trying to like take notes. I'm like, oh, that's good. This is good stuff. But yeah, anyway, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, just follow me on LinkedIn, Mariah Bliss. I truly have no other business. It's really just creating content and sharing insights. I love connecting with folks like you just to talk about content and share what's on your mind. So yeah, folks can find me on LinkedIn, share your thoughts. Would love to hear from other folks.
Yeah, love it. Thanks so much, Mariah.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
There's so much to what Mariah just said that I would love to I could probably talk on it for an hour. Just so much good stuff. Like I said, just the clarity of the thoughts that she had was just honestly hope that I can get to that point someday. That was I thought that was super impressive. The thing that surprised me most about just what I do know of Mariah was just I guess two things. One was the thought leadership stuff, and the second thing was the AI side.
Yep.
If I go to the AI side first, I thought we were going to have a big disagreement there about how like AI's role when it comes to content marketing, right? And like I said, so much of that stuff comes off as lazy, and it was kind of really refreshing to hear. Actually, that's a strategy that I've never truly heard before. So that was a super cool thing that stood out. And the second thing was that thought leadership side of things. And it reminds me of my very first job. This was for the United States Department of Energy. And we were often tasked to do interviews with some of like the head scientists and like the head of the department and all these different things, right? And so often these people would be so uncomfortable, and it was not fun for anyone. And we tried to force them into this box basically of like, hey, here's the content that we're making, and you're either going to make yourself look smart or stupid. Action. Like that's kind of how it felt.
Yep.
And I love that other side of things too, where it's like, hey, this is about relationships and it's about understanding. Like, yes, thought leadership content is super important right now, but how are you going to do it? You can do interviews, you can do podcasts, you can do written interviews. And one of the things that I feel like we are tasked with every so often is anytime that we do that thought leadership stuff, it's, hey, they were a little bit uncomfortable. Like they're confident talking about it, but maybe not like as comfortable being on the screen. So then it leads to like, all right, how do we add some animation or any sort of visuals over top of this to, just be able to use that audio track. So it's just really cool being able to hear a lot of that stuff from her.
Well, it's interesting too, because I think with thought leadership, and it's why I wanted to ask the question about influencers, because there really is that difference of, okay, well, if you have somebody who already has an audience, knows how to speak to that audience, it could be very tempting to utilize that person if they are an influencer of some sort within that. But when you're working with a thought leader, and it's somebody who is already trained on your brand, who has already studied this, who is educated, and who really has a lot of skin in the game, I think that's the big thing, because they want to make your brand look good. They want to be able to talk about it. They want to be a part of the content. And it's like, for me, it comes down to a lot of quality control in that of, okay, if you do put even like for instance, like a top scientist there, they want to convey accurate, insightful information. If you're going to put a leader in your company, they want to make sure that they are, coming off in the way that they want the company to come off to their audiences. They want, the person that's purchasing or just seeing them for the first time to really take that information in and get a good impression. I mean, those first impressions really matter. And she talked about that too with relationship building. It's not just on the internal team. That relationship building is also on the external. It's being able to really get that thought leader to connect with your audiences. And I completely agree with her. It's really right now, because we do have so much, the conversation around AI of, okay, here's a commercial that was created with AI. Here was a blog post that was created with AI. We don't feel connected to those things. We feel connected to the millions of posts and created content that AI scraped to be able to make that blog post or commercial or whatever it is. But we don't feel feel connected to that thing that it made, in air quotes. So it really is important to have that human connection. And I do think I see that trend though too, of thought leadership really being something that's special, because audiences are looking for that authentic side to content marketing. And going into AI too, if before I go into AI, no. Did you want to respond to that or no? Okay.
I was just gonna say there's this sort of like knee-jerk reaction where I think everybody's already seeing it with the AI content out there, where it's like, okay, this is feeling very generic now. Right. And while the machines are amazing at what they do, we've been talking about this, I feel like, for the last year and a half now, of there's going to be this swing to the other side. Yep. Because it's all starting to feel the same. We're starting to catch the signals of what AI stuff looks like. There's been, I see so many videos, especially posted to LinkedIn. There's people that are now AI artists, whatever that means. Yeah. And I'm so impressed by some of the stuff that it's making. But there's still little things, right? I see somebody posted yesterday. Yesterday. There we go. Got the right emphasis there. Yesterday. Of an image of a woman, and she was having a really expressive facial movements, and it looked great. But then she rotated her head just a little bit, and you can see the bun in her hair just go away, just disappeared. Yep. And I'm like, that cannot exist. Just such a little thing, but it makes a world of difference when it comes to actually connecting with people, and just feeling robotic and this thing that was manufactured for their attention, as opposed to this thing that was created, it's totally different things.
Well, and that's really the thing though. I mean, that's the key, is manufactured versus created. Those are the key terms, because it was something that, a year and a half ago, when we really started having this conversation back on our other show, the Command Z show, when we were talking about AI, and I said it then, it's people are going to have AI fatigue, because they're seeing it everywhere and they're not going to connect with it anymore. And the thing is even if AI got to be perfect, right, where you can't tell the difference, and we've seen some stuff, I've seen some stuff where I can't tell. I genuinely, I look at it and I don't know, but it's still not human. It's still not thy authentic touch because it was just manufactured for you to look at and hopefully buy a product. It's not created for you to connect with. That's the big difference there. And I like that Mariah also recognizes that, especially as somebody who is a director of content marketing, is working in this environment. And it's a conversation I have a lot with, the creative conversation with artists versus the marketing conversation that's happening around the money. Is we tend to not be lined up. We're not aligned in this conversation. People kind of start speaking two different languages of, well, it needs to be handcrafted versus, okay, well, we need to be able to understand our budget too at the same time. And I think these two groups of people are kind of still fighting each other on that. But I think what Mariah is doing is really fascinating because she is making it a lot more efficient to come to an idea that actually makes sense and works, but still maintaining the human connection within that, because she's doing a lot more of the AI usage in the ideation process. So there's no wasted time. So we're not wasting time. Okay, well, we did this idea. Oh, well, actually, this other insurance company did this idea 5 years ago and it already worked for them. And people don't want to see it repeated again. It's understanding, okay, well, what is the repetition? Are we creating something that's completely new that does have some amount of novelty to it? And it doesn't waste anybody's time. It doesn't waste the marketer's time. It doesn't waste budgets. And it doesn't waste the time of the artists that are working on it too. They don't want to just be, the artists don't want to only be creating the same thing every 5 years because another company is hopping on the same trend that somebody did 5 years ago. It's creating something that's really different and differentiating the brand and starting something that's new, a new trend that other people will be studying 5 years from now.
Yep. I agree.
Awesome. Well, I thought that was a good episode, and honestly, I could have gone on for another half hour listening to her. I didn't even want to. I wanted to just sit there and let her just talk. Just Mariah, just continue speaking. I don't even want to interrupt. But anyway, this was So if you have any questions for Mariah, she did leave her LinkedIn in there. But otherwise, this is a great episode. And if you have any questions too, shoot them over to us, and we'll try and get those answered on a later episode, or maybe if you want to be on the show.
If you are still listening to this, I appreciate it. And also, you must really enjoy this show, so you should give us 5 stars on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
And if you're on YouTube, give it a like, give it a subscribe and a like if you're on YouTube.
Yep. Smash that like button.
Boom. Okay. All right. All right, everyone, stay magical. Content Alchemy is presented by Made by Things. To learn more about us, check out madebythings.com. And if you have a topic you'd like us to discuss, send us a message at alchemy@madebythings.com.